You're definitely not in the establishment category. But at the beginning of this campaign, you said you were your own man when asked about your father, former Texas Congressman and three-time presidential candidate Ron Paul. Senator Cruz's campaign is out with a video saying that Cruz is the intellectual and political heir to your father's 2012 campaign and the Liberty Movement. And your father now says that it's realistic that Donald Trump will be your party's nominee. So did you make a mistake by not more fully embracing your father politically at the beginning of this campaign?
You know, I've always had a great deal of respect. There's probably no person I respect more in the country or in recent history than my father. I think he was probably the most honest man in politics that we've ever seen in a generation. And so in no way have I ever said that I don't embrace my father or love my father or appreciate everything that he's done for the country. I think what's interesting about where that liberty vote goes that my father brought to the Republican Party is I don't think they're necessarily going to go for Ted. You know, Ted didn't show up. We had an audit the Fed vote, which was the biggest thing my dad had been advocating for 30 years. Ted didn't have time to show up. He was the only Republican that didn't show up for it. And so I think that really that vote is going to stay in the Paul household. I think more of it's coming and it's going to grow. The NSA is another big issue. Ted said he was for NSA reform. But then he told Marco Rubio, no, I voted for the bill because I'm for the government collecting 100% of your cell phone records. I don't think Ted can have it both ways. They want to say they're getting some of the Liberty vote, but we don't see it happening at all. We think we're going to do very well in Iowa with the Liberty vote.
We'll come back to
Well, I mean, I was talked about in the question. Just very quickly, I'd like to respond. The bulk collection of your phone data, the invasion of your privacy did not stop one terrorist attack. I don't think you have to give up your liberty for a false sense of security. When we look at this bulk collection, the court has looked at this. Even the court declared it to be illegal. If we want to collect the records of terrorists, let's do it the old-fashioned way. Let's use the Fourth Amendment. Let's put a name on a warrant. Let's ask a judge for it. Let's respect the history of our country. John Adams said that we fought the war for independence because we wanted to fight against generalized warrants. Let's don't forget that.
Governor Kasich, Senator Paul, go ahead.
Thank you. The issue in Syria is a very important one, and it's one we need to get right. The question is, should we be bombing both sides of the war? Some want to topple Assad. In fact, they want to bomb ISIS and Assad simultaneously. I think that's a really, really bad idea. In fact, I've said for several years that arming the allies of ISIS will make the situation worse. That what we really need to do is defeat ISIS, but if you defeat Assad, what you will wind up with is a larger and more powerful ISIS that occupies that space. You may well see an ISIS that takes over all of Syria.
Chris.
Paul, do you agree with that? We're going to close down mosques. We're going to close down diners.
I think that's a huge mistake to be closing down mosques. But I would say that if you want to defend the country, it begins with border security. And this is where I've had my disagreement with Senator Rubio. When he brought forward the Gang of Eight bill to give citizenship to those who came here illegally, I put forward an amendment that says we should have more scrutiny on those who are coming as students, those who are coming as immigrants, those who are coming as refugees, because we'd had 2 refugees come to my town in Bowling Green and try to attack us. Marco opposed this because they made a deal. He made a deal with Chuck Schumer that he would oppose any conservative amendments. And I think that's a mistake, and I just don't think Marco can have it both ways. You can't be in favor of defending us against Islam, radical Islam, if you're not for border security.
My response.
I'm Mark Watson. I'm known for my tech reviews on YouTube, but I'm also a veteran who served in the Army for 8 years. As an African-American living near Ferguson, I've seen the strain between police officers and the communities they serve firsthand. Now, there are great tools like body cameras that can protect both officers and citizens, but we all currently have better cameras in our pockets than in our precincts. Why aren't we using the technology available to better protect our communities?
Senator Paul, that question to you.
You know, I've supported legislation to allow body cameras. I've been to Ferguson. I've been trying to look for solutions to our criminal justice problem. One thing I discovered in Ferguson was that a third of the budget for the city of Ferguson was being reaped by civil fines. People were just being fined to death. Now, you and I and many of the people in this audience, if we get a $100 fine, we can survive it. If you're living on the edge of poverty, you get a $100 fine or your car towed, a lot of times you lose your job. I also think the war on drugs has disproportionately affected our African American community, and what we need to do is make sure that the war on drugs is equal protection under the law and that we don't unfairly incarcerate another generation of young African American males. In Ferguson, for every 100 African American women, there are only 60 African American men. Drug use is about equal between white and black, but our prisons, 3 out of 4 people in prison are black or brown. I think something has to change. I think it's a big thing that our party needs to be part of, and I've been a leader in Congress on trying to bring about criminal justice reform.
Senator Paul, thank you.
Senator Paul, you know how Washington works. Do you buy that?
I was there and I saw the debate. I saw Ted Cruz say, we'll take citizenship off the table, and then the bill will pass, and I'm for the bill. The bill would involve legalization. He can't have it both ways. But what is particularly insulting, though, is that he is the king of saying, oh, you're for amnesty. Everybody's for amnesty except for Ted Cruz. But it's a falseness, and that's an authenticity problem, that everybody he knows is not as perfect as him because we're all for amnesty. I was for legalization. I think, frankly, if you have border security, you can have legalization. So was Ted, but now he says it wasn't so. That's not true.
Go ahead, sir.
Senator Paul, in May on the campaign trail, you said you didn't get into politics to fight about abortion. You said you were more concerned about the national debt. Your answer is to turn abortion back to the states the way it was before Roe v. Wade. Does that mean that if a liberal state, let's say, wants to make abortion legal, that you're okay with that? And what do you say to conservative voters who believe deeply that abortion is murder?
You know, I think abortion is always wrong. I've supported a variety of solutions, both state as well as federal. In fact, just last week, I introduced the Life at Conception Act, which would say that the 14th Amendment would defend an individual, even in the womb. But I think on the broader question of religion and politics, you know, I think liberty itself requires a virtue, requires a virtuous people. In fact, Washington said that democracy requires a virtuous people. Os Guinness, the theologian, said that liberty requires restraint, but the only restraint consistent with liberty is self-restraint. There's a lot packed into that statement. But the bottom line is we must have virtue, we must have a religious bearing as a nation, but government's not always going to save us, and it's not always going to come from government. But if we don't know right and wrong, I think we have lost our way, I think we come unmoored, and I think without the religious foundation that guides us all, I think we have a great risk of going horribly in the wrong direction.
Sir, just 30 seconds to answer my specific... Just 30 seconds to answer my specific question. Do you favor the idea that abortion should be a states' rights issue, and if a liberal state wants to make it legal, that's their choice? Yes or no?
No, both a federal and a state approach. I have said that we could leave it to the states, but I've also introduced a federal solution as well. So the federal solution would be the Life at Conception Act, which is an act that would federalize the issue. But I've also said for the most part, these issues would be left back to the states. So there might be an occasion if we did overturn Roe v. Wade nationalized the issue. If you actually had the court reverse Roe v. Wade, it would become a state issue once again. I think it would be better the less abortions we have. So the more states that we had that made abortion illegal, the better as far as trying to save and preserve lives.
Thank you, sir.
Gentlemen.
Senator Paul, you have suggested that former President Bill Clinton's history with women is fair game in this campaign. How do you answer those who say you don't hold the sins of the husband against the wife?
You know, I've never really brought this up unless asked the question, but I have responded to the question. I don't blame Hillary Clinton at all for this. I don't think she's responsible for his behavior. But I do think that her position as promoting women's rights and fairness to women in the workplace, that if what Bill Clinton did, any CEO in our country did with an intern, with a 22-year-old, 21-year-old intern in their office, they would be fired. They would never be hired again. Fired, never hired again, and probably shunned in their community. And the thing is, she can't be a champion of women's rights at the same time she's got this that is always lurking out there, this type of behavior. So it is difficult.
Of her husband's.
Yeah, but I combine this also with the millions upon millions of dollars they've taken from regimes in the Middle East who treat women like cattle.
The candidates each get 30 seconds, and we begin with Kentucky Senator Rand Paul.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be back. I'm an eye surgeon from Bowling Green, Kentucky. I miss doing eye surgery, still get to do a little bit. Did a couple of cataract surgeries over Christmas holidays, got to go to Haiti last year. I've gotten to do some incredible things, got to be on the floor of the Senate. It's just been amazing to me. But the thing that is most important to me and caused me to run for office is I'm worried about the country and how much debt we're adding. And I am the one true fiscal conservative who will look at all spending, and that's the only way we'll ever balance our budget. Thank you.